here's the truth about shadow work. It's a lot. Hello, my dears. I'm Mariana, and if you've gotten to know me a little bit by now, you know that I approach everything spiritual with a foundation of education and information and authenticity. And one of the most infuriating things I see happen in the spiritual community is the absurdly casual way we talk about shadow work. Shadow work isn't journaling, it isn't cleansing with sage, it isn't getting real with yourself, confronting bad behavior, getting a tarot reading or a Reiki session, or doing like a long self-care Sunday. It's not something you do in a day, not in a month, not in a year. Shadow work is the lifetime process of integrating the shadow, which is not just your dark side, not just the bad stuff in you. The shadow is a complex archetype that cannot be healed or fixed or undone. It is all that is unintegrated inside of us, meaning the stuff which exists unconsciously, which is very much a part of us, but that we're not aware of, we're not conscious in our day-to-day lives. It's the stuff we've repressed or pushed away for good or bad reasons. And so when we attempt shadow work, we have to necessarily break ourselves apart to make room to let in all that we didn't know about ourselves, or more likely, all that we've had to deny. Shadow work is necessary. It is the work we all have to do to transform, to become more enlightened, aware beings. But here's the other thing about shadow work that is extremely, extremely important. Shadow work is also dangerous. If someone is very psychologically healthy and extremely stable, I don't know why you're attempting shadow work, but hey, you might be able to do it no problem. But if you're like me, or most of us, and you have a tendency to fall into despair, or depression, or self-hate, or most alarmingly, any form of self-harm, attempting shadow work can be something so destabilizing that it actually becomes problematic. It's really something that shouldn't be done alone, or at least without informed, clear guidance. The more that you see all that you were once blind to, the more that you inevitably question who you are, who you've been. So let's talk a little bit about what shadow work really is, and then I'll share with you 5 ways that I've worked with it and that I think others can work with it in a safe, manageable way. The shadow, of course, was first identified by none other than the shadow was one of Jung's core archetypes of the psyche, and he described it as all that was unintegrated inside of us, meaning all that we had to push away, all that we had to keep separate from our ego consciousness in order to protect ourselves, or simply because we weren't aware of it. The common misconception about shadow work is that it's a healing practice, that it's about bringing more light into yourself. But actually, that couldn't be farther from the truth. More accurately, it's about blending the light and the dark so you can be a whole conscious being. This is really important because it's our constant emphasis on the light that makes the shadow so strong, that continues to drive it into repression because we don't want to have any darkness inside of us. Jung said, "The enlargement of the light side of consciousness has the necessary consequence that the part of the psyche which is less light and less capable of consciousness is thrown into darkness to such an extent that sooner or later a rift occurs in the psychic system." This is a really complicated way of saying that when we prioritize the light, we don't erase the darkness, we just condemn it to a place of hiding inside of us. So we're not trying to bring light to our shadows. We're trying to make space for our shadows to exist inside of us. This is basically the plot for like every horror movie. You hear something in the attic or in the basement, and it doesn't stop pursuing and haunting you until you finally go down there and look. We have to go into the dark. And we're not there just to fix our bad behaviors. We're there to examine our complexes, to take a real look at who we are. The first way that we can approach shadow work is to notice your projections. Projection is basically when we experience something internally that we can't really process, so we just imagine it happening outside of ourselves. If there's somebody who continuously gets under your skin, more than likely you're projecting something onto them about yourself that you're really uncomfortable with. As Jung says, everything that irritates us about others can lead to an understanding of ourselves. I'm warning you, today is just me showing off all the Jung quotes I know. I'm not even pretending. We also often project certain things about ourselves onto characters we may see or situations going on in the world. We might over-identify with the hero or get weirdly very defensive about a villain. Just question if these are projections. Ask yourself if this is something that might be presenting outside of yourself because it's part of your shadow, because it's a part of yourself that you've learned to deny. This is a pretty safe way to open the portal to shadow work because there's not too much to do here but notice. Really make sure not to judge or shame yourself for what might come up. The purpose is just to see it and eventually understand it. Number 2, brutal honesty and radical acceptance. Once you start to open yourself to these truths that may come forward, you have to be prepared for the inevitable, immediate denial afterward. This is a mechanism that we all have that is designed to protect our fragile egos. For example, let's say you hate the way a friend gossips, but then you start to realize that's a projection for your own tendency to be kind of gossipy yourself. You might react to this with explaining why it's okay for you and bad for them. You're basically just protecting yourself from feeling bad. You're protecting yourself from the shame that'll inevitably come from realizing you do something you don't like. So once you finally get to the truth, the next step, and the hardest step, is radical acceptance of it. You have to immediately tell yourself, it's okay. And I know, maybe you think, it's not okay. I don't want to act like that. I don't want to be that kind of person. And you won't be forever. The important thing to remember about shadow work is that these transformations take a long time to manifest. If we don't radically accept the way we are, then we start to damage ourselves. We start to punish ourselves about it. This is when we really fall into self-hatred and depression and loathing. We lose all the magic and the will to actually change meaningfully. If you just punish yourself or shame yourself for these behaviors, you're only going to drag yourself deeper into the dark. Number 3, name your patterns. Another way our shadows show up is in our complexes, our strange psychic patterns that develop as mechanisms of coping with our lives. These tend to develop early in our childhood, so they're a lot harder to recognize and go a lot deeper. So the easiest way to describe this is by giving you a personal example. Apparently I'm very comfortable with sharing my weirdest, most uncomfortable stuff on YouTube, and I'm sure that won't haunt me in 5 years at all. So when I was in my early 20s, this is a while ago, I had a lot of anxiety, and I would have these mini anxiety attacks in which I would just kind of like spill myself all over the place, and most often on my partner. I was kind of mean. I was very stressed. I knew I felt out of control, and I knew this is not how I wanted to be. So I promised myself, I'll do better. I'll figure it out. I'll read this next self-help book. And then eventually I started Jungian analysis. And when this came up, I was really defensive about it. I kept saying,
I'm working on it. I know.
It took a long time for me to realize that this was a symptom of a larger complex that I had been suffering with for years. It came from a deep fear I had that I was abandonable, and I was testing my partner over and over again to see if this was true. So with my analyst, I practiced, instead of fixing the thing, just seeing it. So the name I gave it was my warrior mode, because I felt very self-protective and very strong and very ready to go into battle. I was able to see that this was me, but this was the shadow. And once I had that separation and I didn't identify with this shadow aspect of myself when it would come into play, then I was able to have a little bit more control in the moment. And it was really important for me to not hate myself because of this behavior, and also not to let myself off the hook. It was a darkness in me, but it only come to be because my little child heart wasn't ready or prepared to accept this huge fear that I had lingering inside myself. So naming is a great practice for attempting to get in relationship with these aspects of your shadow so you don't over-identify with them, and you also have a little bit of understanding for why they came to be. Number 4, active imagination and dream work. As you dive more into your shadow is going to appear more in your unconscious space, probably in your dreams. So there's not much to do here, but keep a dream journal and try to be as thorough and complete as you can. Perhaps you'll meet characters who chase you or sabotage you or say nasty things to you. Then when you have a collection of strong images, you can actually work with it in your waking mind. This is called active imagination, and it's pretty intense, so make sure to go slow with it. But the idea is that you take an image that may come from a dream, and you kind of go into this space of like lucid dreaming, where you're allowing the image to guide you through a story that you're participating in, but not consciously directing. The idea is that you're getting to work with this thing in your unconscious. You're getting to relate to it and understand it and get a bigger picture for what's really going on here. The most important thing when you're doing active imagination is to not get too thinky. It should be an instinctual exercise so that you're being guided by the unconscious where the shadow actually exists. And lastly, get help. This is the biggest and most important tip of all because shadow work is extremely intense. Jung, who first conceived of the shadow, was very clear that shadow work is not meant to be attempted alone. This misconception that shadow work is bettering yourself is deeply harmful because yes, sometimes you can confront a part of yourself that is acting out, or you can rein in some bad behavior. It's deep, transformational work. It's the integration of our darkness. It's the deep examination of that which triggers us into losing control of ourselves. So please, if you know you have some real stuff to get through, if you've ever experienced any kind of trauma, don't attempt shadow work all alone. I really, really recommend that you seek out a therapist or an analyst who can be with you on that process. Or if that's not in your budget or not accessible to you, at least seek out some kind of spiritual guidance or spiritual healing. Maybe see a Reiki practitioner to keep your energies aligned, or try a life coach who at least can keep you on the right track, or get some tarot readings and make sure that you're constantly reflecting and healing yourself as you're trying to do this deeper, darker work. When I say tarot readings, I do not mean YouTube pick a card readings, because while those are very fun, not great for when you're trying to work through some shadow stuff. You need someone to tell you specifically what's going on, okay? Do we understand? Okay, good. Take really good care of yourself while you're embarking on shadow work. Prioritize your mental health. Seriously. Don't just do shadow work by yourself. Shadow work is not self-care. It is not spell work. It is deep, transformational, psycho-spiritual work that has to be done with guidance. It's slow, it's shattering, and it's essential. So make sure that you have the right people in your corner. I hope you really got something from all these tips. I really hope that you approach shadow work intentionally and carefully. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions or any input. I'll list some resources in the description so you can, find things that I've vetted. That's not just like internet garbage. So if you got something out of this or you like this, please subscribe. This week I got 100 followers, which is just amazing. I am so grateful that you're here, and please stick around. And if you're new, lovely to meet you. Very glad you're here. And don't forget to check out my Instagram. That is where I do a lot of my psycho-spiritual goodness. And you can also check out my Patreon to support me as a creator and get some other really awesome goodies. So go do your shadow work safely and intentionally and carefully. And please remember that It's all you. Even the dark, even the scary stuff. It's you, and it's you for a reason. You're not a bad person. Everything that you are because you've learned how to survive. And so accept yourself. So thank you, my dears, and have a beautiful, meaningful day. Poor Pandora went to the vet today. You went to the vet today, and it was really scary. And you were shaking and panting. Oh, poor girl.